The alarm screamed through the Valari command center as another colony went dark. Ambassador Zethara watched the display with growing horror as red dots spread across the star map like a deadly infection. Each red dot meant millions of his people were gone forever. How many this time? He asked, his crystal-like skin flickering with distress patterns. Valaris 7 is completely consumed, reported his aide, Lithine. Her voice carried the musical tones of their species, but now it trembled with fear. That makes 15 colonies in 2 solar cycles. The Kethrin Horde moves faster than our evacuation ships. Zethara closed his 4 eyes and tried to center himself. The meditation techniques of his ancestors felt useless now. How could one find peace when facing extinction? The Valari had spent 10,000 years building a civilization based on harmony and understanding. They had never imagined that something could exist that could not be reasoned with. "Show me the projections again," he said. The holographic display changed to show the predicted path of destruction. The massive shapes moved like a slow tide across Valari space, consuming everything in their path. At their current speed, they would reach the core worlds in less than 10 cycles. 12 billion Valari lived on those worlds. There were not enough ships in the entire fleet to evacuate even a tenth of them. "We need help," Lithine whispered. "We cannot face this alone." Zethara knew she was right. The Valari Council had already tried everything they could think of. They sent diplomats to communicate with the Kethrin, but the massive creatures showed no sign of intelligence. They tried to redirect them with gravitational fields, but the Horde simply flowed around the obstacles like water. They even attempted to frighten them away with bright lights and loud sounds, but nothing worked. "Prepare a transmission to all known civilizations," Zethara ordered. "Tell them we need immediate aid. Tell them we are dying." Lithine began working at her control panel. Her delicate fingers moved quickly over the crystal interfaces. "What kind of aid should we request?" "Evacuation ships. Medical supplies. Food and shelter for refugees. Anything they can spare." Zethara paused and looked at the advancing red tide on the display. "Tell them we are a peaceful people facing complete destruction. Tell them we have nowhere else to turn." The transmission array powered up with a soft humming sound. Across the galaxy, the desperate message would travel at faster than light speeds, reaching every civilization with the technology to receive it. The Valari had always been generous in sharing their knowledge with younger species. Now they hoped that generosity would be returned. Far away, on a small blue planet orbiting a yellow star, the message arrived at Deep Space Monitoring Station Alpha. The facility floated in the cold darkness beyond Pluto, its massive antenna arrays constantly scanning for signals from distant worlds. Communications Officer Jake Murphy was finishing his 3rd cup of coffee when the alert chimed on his console. The signal was strong and came from a known friendly civilization. Jake had processed Valari communications before. They were always polite and usually contained scientific data or cultural exchanges. This message was different. The translation software struggled with some of the words, marking them as having no human equivalent. Jake frowned as he read the text on his screen. "Urgent assistance required," the message began. "The Valari Federation faces complete extinction. Massive hostile force consuming our colonies. 12 billion lives at risk. Request immediate aid from any civilization capable of response. We are a peaceful people with no means of defense. Please help us survive." Jake sat up straighter in his chair. This was not a routine scientific exchange. This was a distress call from an entire civilization. He immediately forwarded the message to Earth Command and marked it as Priority 1. At Earth Command headquarters in Geneva, Admiral Kate Sullivan was reviewing fleet deployment reports when the priority alert appeared on her personal screen. She had been expecting updates on mining operations in the asteroid belt, not an alien distress call. Kate read the message twice, then called her staff together. Within an hour, the command center was full of officers studying the Valari transmission and the star charts showing their location. "What do we know about these Valari?" Kate asked her intelligence officer. "Peaceful species, Admiral," replied Commander Alex Turner. "We've had limited contact with them for about 15 years. They share scientific data freely and have never shown any aggressive behavior. Their technology is advanced but focused on art, medicine, and environmental harmony. And this hostile force that's attacking them? Unknown, ma'am. The Valari call them the Kethrin Horde. Based on the transmission, they appear to be consuming entire colonies. The Valari describe them as unstoppable destroyers. Kate studied the tactical display. The Valari controlled a region of space about 200 light-years from Earth. Not close neighbors, but not impossibly far either. If hostile aliens were wiping out entire civilizations in that area, they might eventually become a threat to human space as well. "What's our response capability?" she asked. "The Third Fleet is currently on patrol in that sector," reported Captain Ryan Brooks. 3 destroyers, 2 cruisers, and the carrier UES Titan. We could have them at the Valari border in 6 days. Kate made her decision quickly. The Valari were asking for help, and humanity had the power to provide it. More importantly, stopping aggressive aliens before they became a threat to Earth was good strategy. "Order the Third Fleet to respond immediately," she commanded. "Full battle readiness. If there's a hostile force out there consuming civilizations, we need to stop it before it spreads." The orders went out within the hour. Across human space, ships changed course and prepared for combat. The crew members had no idea they were about to encounter the most unusual military situation in human history. On the destroyer UES Thunderstrike, Captain Brooks called his senior officers together to brief them on the mission. The ship's conference room was cramped but functional, designed for war rather than comfort. "We're responding to a distress call from the Valari Federation," Brooks explained to his assembled officers. "They're under attack by something called the Kethrin Horde. Intelligence is limited, but it appears to be a massive invasion force." Lieutenant Commander Lisa Grant, his tactical officer, raised her hand. "Do we know anything about Kethrin military capabilities?" "Negative. The Valari describe them as unstoppable, but that might just mean the Valari aren't equipped for military action. We know they're a peaceful species with no real defense force. So we're going in blind against an unknown enemy," said Lieutenant Sam Parker, the ship's navigator. "Sounds like a typical Tuesday." Brooks smiled grimly. Human military forces were used to facing unknown threats. It was part of the job when you came from a species that had learned to fight everything, from wild animals to each other, throughout their evolutionary history. "Our mission is to assess the threat and provide military assistance to the Valari," Brooks continued. "We'll coordinate with the other ships in the fleet to establish defensive positions and engage the enemy." The briefing continued for another hour as they planned their approach. None of the human officers questioned whether they should help. The Valari had asked for aid and humanity answered. It was that simple. As the human fleet jumped to faster-than-light travel, racing toward the embattled Valari worlds, neither species understood how differently they viewed the situation. The Valari expected rescue ships filled with supplies and peaceful solutions. The humans brought warships and weapons, ready to fight an enemy they had never seen. The greatest misunderstanding in galactic history was about to unfold, but it would lead to salvation in the most unexpected way. The human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of Valari space. Captain Ryan Brooks stood on the bridge of the UES Thunderstrike, watching the main screen as his sensors swept the area for enemy ships. What he saw confused him completely. "Where are the battle lines?" he asked his tactical officer. Lieutenant Commander Lisa Grant checked her displays twice before answering. "Sir, I'm not detecting any military formations at all. No defensive positions, no patrol ships, nothing that looks like a war zone." Brooks frowned. The Valari distress call had made it sound like they were in the middle of a desperate battle. Instead, the space around them looked almost peaceful. Beautiful crystal ships moved in slow, graceful patterns between the planets. There were no explosions, no weapons fire, no signs of combat anywhere. "Maybe we're too late," suggested Lieutenant Sam Parker from his navigation station. "Maybe the battle already moved on." "Or maybe it hasn't started yet," Brooks replied. "Scan for the Valari command ship. We need to make contact and get a situation report." The largest Valari vessel was easy to find. It was a work of art more than a military ship, covered in curved surfaces that sparkled like jewels. The UES Thunderstrike looked like a gray metal brick beside it. "Valari vessel, this is Captain Brooks of the Earth Colonial Defense Fleet," he transmitted. "We received your distress call and are here to provide military assistance." The response came quickly, but the translation software had trouble with some of the words. The Valari language was full of musical tones and emotional concepts that had no human equivalent. "Earth vessel, we welcome you with great relief," came the reply. "I am Prime Minister Sethina of the Valari Federation. We are grateful beyond words that you answered our call for aid. When can you begin the evacuation procedures?" Brooks looked at his officers with confusion. Evacuation procedures? We're here to fight the Kethrin Horde, not run away from them. There was a long pause before Scythena responded. Fight? I do not understand this concept in this context. We need ships to carry our people to safety. The Horde cannot be opposed. It can only be avoided. Request permission to come aboard, Brooke said. We need to discuss strategy face-to-face, another pause. Of course. We will prepare a harmony chamber for peaceful discussion. Brooke selected Commander Alex Turner to lead the diplomatic team. Turner had the most experience with alien cultures, though none of his previous encounters had involved a military crisis. He took a small group with him, including Sergeant Maya Rodriguez and Dr. Nathan Cross. The shuttle bay of the Valari ship was unlike anything the humans had ever seen. The walls seemed to be made of living crystal that pulsed with soft light. Beautiful music played from speakers they could not see. The air smelled like flowers after rain. Welcome, friends from Earth, said Prime Minister Scythena as she glided toward them. She was tall and thin, with skin that looked like polished gemstone. Her movements were so graceful they seemed almost like dancing. The humans walked carefully, their heavy boots loud on the crystal floor. Sergeant Rodriguez kept her hand near her weapon out of habit, then realized how wrong that felt in this peaceful place. Thank you for responding so quickly. Scythena continued. How many of your ships can carry refugees? We have calculated that we need transport for at least 8 billion individuals from the core worlds. Commander Turner exchanged glances with his team. Prime Minister, I think there may be some confusion. We're here to help you fight the Kethrin Horde, not evacuate your people. Scythena's skin flickered with patterns of confusion. Fight? I do not comprehend. The Horde cannot be fought. They are forces of nature like storms or earthquakes. One does not fight such things. One seeks shelter from them, Dr. Cross stepped forward. As the team's xenobiologist, he was trained to notice alien behavior patterns. Prime Minister, can you show us your military facilities? Your weapons? Your soldiers? Military? Scythena repeated the word like it was foreign to her. Weapons? I fear your translation device is malfunctioning. We have no such things. But surely you have some way to defend yourselves, Turner insisted. Every civilization faces threats. We have always resolved conflicts through communication and understanding, Scythena explained. When we encounter problems, we discuss them until we find harmony. This has worked for 10,000 years. Sergeant Rodriguez could not hide her amazement. You've never had a war? Never had to fight anyone? War? Scythena's skin patterns shifted to deep confusion. This is another word our translators cannot process properly. What is war? The humans stared at each other in shock. Dr. Cross began scanning the Valari leader with his medical equipment. The readings he got made him check the device twice. Commander, he whispered to Turner, their bone structure is incredibly fragile, hollow, like a bird's, and their muscle density is about half of a human child's. They're physically incapable of violence. Turner began to understand the scope of the problem. Prime Minister, please tell us about the Kethrin Horde. What exactly are they? Scythena led them to a viewing chamber where holographic displays showed the approaching threat. The humans watched in silence as massive shapes moved across the star map. Each shape was enormous, easily the size of a small moon. They came from the dead regions beyond our territory, Scythena explained. They consume everything in their path. Planets, asteroids, space stations. They leave nothing behind but empty space. Are they intelligent? Turner asked.
Have you tried to communicate with them?
We sent our best diplomats, Scythena replied sadly. They showed no response to any form of communication. They do not speak, they do not answer, they simply consume. Dr. Cross studied the holographic images carefully. The Kethrin creatures looked organic rather than mechanical. They moved like living things, flowing around obstacles in space like schools of fish. How big are they individually? He asked. Each creature is approximately 2,000 meters in length, Scythena answered. They travel in groups of thousands. Sergeant Rodriguez did quick math in her head. Each alien was bigger than most human buildings, and they moved in massive swarms. No wonder the Valari thought they were unstoppable. Have you tried using weapons against them? Turner asked. Scythena looked confused again. Weapons? You keep using words we do not understand. Dr. Cross tried a different approach. Have you tried using energy beams or projectiles to damage them? We do not have such devices, Scythena said. Why would we create things designed to cause damage? The concept is foreign to us. The full scope of the situation finally became clear to the humans. The Valari were a completely peaceful species facing a threat they had no way to comprehend or resist. They had never developed weapons because they had never needed them. The idea of fighting back simply did not exist in their culture. "Commander," Rodriguez said quietly, "they're completely helpless. These Kethrin things could wipe out their entire civilization, and the Valari wouldn't even know how to resist." Turner nodded grimly. The situation was even worse than Earth Command had thought. The Valari were not warriors asking for backup in a difficult battle. They were refugees asking for transportation away from a natural disaster they could not fight. But the humans were not refugees. They were soldiers from a world where everything had tried to kill them for millions of years. They knew how to fight, and more importantly, they knew that sometimes fighting was the only option. "Prime Minister," Turner said carefully, "we may have a different solution to your problem." Scythena's skin patterns brightened with hope. "You have larger evacuation ships?" "Not exactly," Turner replied. "We're going to try something your people have never considered. We're going to stop the Kethrin Horde permanently." The Valari leader stared at him with her large, gentle eyes. She had no idea what the humans were planning, but she could sense their confidence. For the first time since the crisis began, she felt a tiny spark of hope that maybe, somehow, her people might survive after all. Captain Helen Pierce stood on the bridge of the UES Guardian, watching the long-range scanner displays with growing concern. Admiral Kate Sullivan had ordered her ship to scout ahead and get a closer look at the Kethrin Horde. What she was seeing through the sensors made no sense at all. "Are you sure these readings are correct?" she asked her science officer. Lieutenant Sam Parker checked his instruments again and nodded. "Confirmed, Captain. The Kethrin aren't using any technology we can recognize. No metal ships, no energy shields, no weapon systems. They appear to be completely biological." Pierce moved closer to the main display. The screen showed hundreds of massive shapes moving slowly through space. They looked more like giant sea creatures than military vessels. Their surfaces rippled and pulsed like living skin. "How are they surviving in the vacuum of space?" she wondered aloud. "Unknown, ma'am," Parker replied. "But they're definitely alive. I'm reading biological signatures from all of them. Heartbeats, brain activity, digestive processes. It's like they evolved to live in space instead of on planets." Pierce had seen many strange things during her years in the Colonial Defense Fleet, but this was completely new. The Kethrin Horde was not an army or a fleet. It was a migration of space-dwelling creatures unlike anything in human records. "Take us closer," she ordered, "but maintain safe distance. I want to see what they're actually doing." The UES Guardian moved carefully toward the edge of the swarm. As they got closer, the true size of the creatures became clear. Each one was enormous, easily 2 kilometers long and half as wide. Their bodies were covered in what looked like natural armor plating, dark and thick as battleship hull metal. "Captain," called out Ensign Carol Hayes from the communication station, "I'm picking up some kind of sound from them. It's very low frequency, almost below human hearing range." "Put it through the speakers," Pierce ordered. The bridge filled with a deep, rumbling sound like distant thunder. It rose and fell in slow patterns, sometimes joined by other voices in a chorus of giant calls. The sound was not threatening or angry. It was sad and tired, like the songs of whales. "They're communicating with each other," Dr. Nathan Cross observed. He had joined the scouting mission to study alien biology. "This sounds like navigation calls. They're staying together as a group during a long journey." Pierce watched the creatures move past a small asteroid. Instead of going around it, they simply consumed it completely. The rock disappeared into their massive mouths and was broken down by powerful digestive processes. "They're eating everything in their path," she said. "No wonder the Valari are terrified." "Captain, look at this," Parker said, pointing to a scanner display. "I'm reading massive empty regions behind them. Entire star systems with nothing left but empty space. They've been feeding like this for a long time." The evidence was clear on the long-range sensors. The Kethrin Horde had carved a path of destruction thousands of light-years long. Behind them lay dead space where nothing remained except the basic building blocks of matter. "But where did they come from?" Pierce asked. "And why are they moving this direction?" Dr. Cross studied the pattern of their movement and the empty regions behind them. "I think they're refugees too, in their own way. Look at the data from the Galactic core region. Something catastrophic happened there about 50 years ago. The display changed to show readings from the center of the galaxy. Where there should have been millions of stars and countless planets, there was now only an expanding zone of darkness and radiation. The galactic core is dying, Cross continued. Some kind of massive stellar collapse or black hole formation. It's making that entire region uninhabitable. The Kethrin aren't invaders. They're fleeing from disaster just like any other refugee group. Pierce felt a chill as she understood the implications. They're not evil. They're just trying to survive. But they're so big that their survival means everything else in their path gets destroyed. Exactly, Cross said. To them, planets and asteroids are just food sources. They probably don't even realize that smaller life forms live on those worlds. We might be too small for them to notice. The Kethrin continued their slow movement through space, completely ignoring the tiny human ship nearby. They showed no aggression, no military formation, no sign that they even knew they were being watched. Run a projection, Pierce ordered. Show me where they're heading. The tactical display calculated the Horde's course and speed. The result was worse than anyone had expected. The creatures were heading directly toward the most populated region of local space. If they continued on their current path, they would consume dozens of inhabited star systems over the next few decades. They're not just a threat to the Valari, Parker observed. Eventually they'll reach human space too. Pierce nodded grimly. The Kethrin Horde was a threat to every living thing in their path, but not because they were evil or aggressive. They were simply following their nature as massive space-dwelling creatures that needed to eat constantly to survive. Captain, called Ensign Hayes, I'm getting a priority transmission from Admiral Sullivan. The Admiral's image appeared on the main screen. She looked tired but determined. Report, Captain Pierce. What are we facing? Ma'am, the situation is more complex than we thought, Pierce began. The Kethrin aren't a military force. They're biological entities, possibly the last survivors from the Galactic core disaster. They're massive, heavily armored, and they consume everything in their path to survive. Can they be reasoned with? Sullivan asked. Unknown, Admiral. They show signs of intelligence. But they may not be aware that smaller life forms exist. Dr. Cross believes they're operating on pure survival instinct. Sullivan was quiet for a moment as she considered this information. What about their defenses? Can they be stopped? Dr. Cross stepped forward to answer. Their natural armor appears to be incredibly thick, Admiral. The Valari's peaceful energy tools can't even scratch it. Based on our scans, it would take significant firepower to damage even one of them. How many are we talking about? Sullivan asked. Pierce checked her sensor readings. Approximately 40,000 individual creatures in the main swarm, ma'am. Each one is roughly 2 kilometers long. There are also smaller groups scattered throughout this region of space. The Admiral's expression grew more serious. 40,000 creatures that size with natural armor thick enough to resist energy weapons. This is going to require a completely different approach than anything we've faced before. There's something else, Admiral, Pierce continued. Based on their current course and speed, they'll reach inhabited human colonies within 15 years. This isn't just a Valari problem anymore. Sullivan nodded slowly. Understood. Continue monitoring them, but maintain safe distance. I need to discuss this with Earth Command and develop a strategy. After the transmission ended, Pierce stood quietly on her bridge, watching the massive creatures move through space like living islands. The Kethrin Horde was beautiful in its own terrible way, but it represented an existential threat to every civilization in its path. Captain, Dr. Cross said softly, I don't think the galaxy has ever faced anything like this before. These creatures are larger and more powerful than anything in recorded history. How do you fight something that can eat planets? Pierce thought about the question seriously. Humans had always found ways to deal with threats, no matter how impossible they seemed. Their species had survived ice ages, predators, diseases, and wars that should have wiped them out completely. The same way we've always dealt with impossible problems, Doctor, she replied. We figure out what they need to survive, and then we make sure they can't get it. But even as she said the words, Pierce wondered if humanity was finally facing something too big and too powerful to stop. The Kethrin Horde was not just an enemy to be defeated. It was a force of nature as inevitable as a hurricane or earthquake. The question was not whether they could be stopped, but whether anyone in the galaxy was capable of stopping them before they consumed everything in their path. Admiral Kate Sullivan stood in the war room aboard the UES Titan, staring at the holographic display that showed the approaching Kethrin Horde. Around the table sat her best officers and scientists, all trying to solve an impossible problem. How do you stop 40,000 creatures the size of mountains that can eat entire planets? Conventional weapons won't work, reported Colonel Danny Foster. Our biggest plasma cannons might scratch their armor, but it would take days to kill just one of them. We don't have enough firepower to stop the entire swarm. Dr. Nathan Cross nodded in agreement. Their natural armor is thicker than any battleship hull. Evolution made them nearly indestructible. They've probably survived impacts with asteroids and radiation storms that would destroy our strongest ships. Sullivan listened to the reports with growing frustration. Every solution her team proposed ran into the same problem. The Kethrin were simply too big and too tough to fight with normal military tactics. What about the Valari? She asked. Have they come up with any ideas? Commander Alex Turner shook his head. They're still focused on evacuation, Admiral. Prime Minister Scythena keeps asking when we can start loading refugees onto our ships. The concept of fighting back is completely foreign to them. They actually seem horrified by our discussions of combat, added Captain Ryan Brooks. When I mentioned using nuclear weapons, their representative's skin turned completely white and she had to leave the room. Sullivan understood the Valari reaction. They were a peaceful species that had never faced real violence. The idea of deliberately destroying living creatures was as alien to them as their pacifism was to humans. We need to think differently, Sullivan said. This isn't a normal military problem. The Kethrin aren't an enemy army. They're more like a natural disaster. Chief Petty Officer Carlos Martinez, who had been quietly studying the engineering reports, suddenly looked up. Admiral, what if we treat them exactly like that? Like a natural disaster instead of an enemy? Explain, Sullivan ordered. Martinez called up a new display showing asteroid mining operations. We use controlled explosions to break up asteroids for mining. We redirect their paths with gravitational fields. We move massive amounts of rock and metal every day. What if we scaled that up? The room fell silent as everyone considered the implications. Dr. Cross was the first to speak. You're talking about using the asteroids themselves as weapons. Not weapons, Martinez corrected. Tools. The same tools we use for construction and mining. We just aim them at the Kethrin instead of at refineries. Colonel Foster began calculating numbers on his tablet. The kinetic energy from a single large asteroid moving at high speed would be enormous. Bigger than any bomb we've ever built. But how do we move asteroids fast enough and accurately enough to hit moving targets? Turner asked. Martinez smiled. We don't move the asteroids to hit the Kethrin. We move the Kethrin to hit the asteroids. Sullivan leaned forward with interest. Continue. The Kethrin follow predictable paths when they're feeding, Martinez explained. They go straight for the largest masses of matter. If we set up a corridor of asteroids in their path, they'll naturally move toward them. Then we detonate the asteroids just as the creatures reach them. Captain Helen Pierce, who had been studying the Kethrin behavior patterns, nodded slowly. It could work. They're not trying to avoid danger because they don't recognize it as danger. They've never encountered anything that could hurt them. Dr. Cross brought up biological data on the display. Even their thick armor has limits. The right amount of kinetic energy could crack it. And if we can breach their outer shell, the pressure differential would be fatal in the vacuum of space. Sullivan felt a spark of hope for the first time since the crisis began. How many asteroids would we need? For the main swarm? At least 1,000, Foster calculated. We'd need to set up multiple killing fields along their projected path. The asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter has millions of suitable rocks, Martinez added. We could redirect them using gravity tractors and fusion engines. It would take time, but it's possible. Turner raised a concern. Admiral, the Valari are not going to approve of this plan. The scale of destruction we're talking about would horrify them. They don't have to approve, Sullivan replied firmly. This is about survival. Sometimes you have to do terrible things to prevent even worse things from happening. The planning session continued for hours as the team worked out the details. They would need every available ship and all of Earth's industrial capacity to pull off an operation this massive. But slowly, a plan took shape. Captain Brooks would coordinate the asteroid redirection operations. His engineering teams would attach fusion drives to selected asteroids and guide them into position along the Kethrin migration route. Chief Martinez would oversee the placement of plasma mining charges. The same explosives used to break up asteroids for mining would be converted into massive space mines. Timed to detonate when the Kethrin creatures came within range, Colonel Foster would handle the tactical coordination. His job was to ensure that every explosion happened at exactly the right moment to cause maximum damage to the swarm. Dr. Cross would continue studying Kethrin biology to identify their weak points. Even creatures that size had to have vulnerabilities that could be exploited. Meanwhile, Captain Pierce would maintain surveillance of the Horde to track their movements and make sure they stayed on their predicted course. The plan was ambitious beyond anything humanity had ever attempted. They were essentially turning an entire region of space into a massive trap, using the laws of physics as their weapon. "There's one more thing to consider," Dr. Cross said as the meeting was winding down. "My research suggests the Kethrin might not be the only migration heading this way. Long-range sensors are detecting similar groups throughout this region of the galaxy." Sullivan felt a chill. "How many more?" "Unknown. But if the galactic core disaster was as widespread as we think, there could be dozens of these swarms scattered across known space, each one heading toward inhabited systems to find food." The implications were staggering. Even if they stopped this Kethrin horde, there might be others behind them. The galaxy could be facing an extinction-level migration of creatures fleeing the dead galactic core. "Then we need to make sure our solution works perfectly the first time," Sullivan said, "because we might need to use it again." As the officers filed out to begin their preparations, Turner lingered behind. "Admiral, are we sure about this? The Valari trusted us to help them. I'm not certain they'll understand what we're about to do." Sullivan looked at the display showing the projected destruction zone. Thousands of asteroids would be destroyed. The explosions would be visible from light years away. It would be the largest act of deliberate destruction in recorded galactic history. "Commander, the Valari asked us for aid. We're giving them what they need, not what they want. Sometimes salvation comes in forms that look like damnation." Turner nodded, but his expression remained troubled. "The other galactic civilizations are going to hear about this. They'll know that humans are capable of this level of destruction. They might decide we're more dangerous than the Kethrin." "That's a problem for tomorrow," Sullivan replied. "Today we focus on making sure there is a tomorrow. Get our people moving, Commander. We have a lot of work to do and not much time to do it." As Turner left, Sullivan remained alone with the tactical display. She knew he was right to be concerned. What they were planning would change how the galaxy viewed humanity forever, but sometimes being the protector meant accepting that others would fear your strength. The Kethrin horde continued its slow approach toward Valari space, unaware that the small creatures it had ignored were preparing the largest trap in galactic history. Soon they would learn that size and armor were no match for intelligence and determination. Earth's children were about to show the galaxy what Deathworlders could accomplish when everything they cared about was threatened. The Proxima Valaris system had never seen anything like what was happening in its outer regions. Thousands of asteroids hung in space like a deadly constellation, each one equipped with fusion drives and plasma charges. The human fleet had worked for 6 days straight to position everything perfectly. Captain Ryan Brooks floated in the zero gravity of his command center, watching the final preparations. Around him, hundreds of human ships maintained precise positions throughout the killing field. This was the largest coordinated operation in human military history. "All asteroids are in position," reported Chief Petty Officer Carlos Martinez. "Plasma charges are armed and ready. We're as prepared as we're going to get." Through the main view screen, Brooks could see the Kethrin horde approaching like a slow-moving storm. The massive creatures had no idea they were swimming into a trap. To them, the asteroids looked like an easy meal scattered across their path. On the planet below, 3 billion Valari waited in their crystal cities. Most had no idea what the humans were planning. Their leaders had tried to explain, but the concept of deliberate destruction was too alien for most Valari to understand. Admiral Kate Sullivan's voice crackled over the communication system from her flagship. "All units, this is Admiral Sullivan. The Kethrin horde will reach the engagement zone in 30 minutes. Remember, we only get one chance at this. Make every shot count." Across the human fleet, thousands of officers and crew members prepared for the most unusual battle any of them had ever fought. They were not facing enemy soldiers or hostile ships. They were trying to stop a force of nature that had been consuming worlds for decades. Dr. Nathan Cross monitored the approaching creatures from his science station. "The lead elements of the horde are beginning to feed on the outer asteroids," he reported. "They're following the pattern exactly as we predicted. The Kethrin moved through space like giant whales through an ocean. Their massive mouths opened to consume the asteroids in their path. They showed no awareness that anything unusual was happening. First detonation in 60 seconds, announced Colonel Danny Foster from his tactical station. All ships prepare for multiple simultaneous explosions. Captain Helen Pierce, commanding the surveillance group, watched the creatures approach the first killing zone. The largest Kethrin was nearly 3 kilometers long, its dark armor scarred from decades of travel through space. It moved toward a cluster of prepared asteroids with the confidence of a creature that had never faced a real threat. 30 seconds, Foster called out. The tension throughout the human fleet was enormous. Everyone knew that if this plan failed, there was no backup strategy. The Kethrin Horde would continue its advance and consume everything in its path. 10 seconds, Foster announced. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, execute. Space erupted in light and fury. Hundreds of asteroids detonated simultaneously, releasing energy equivalent to thousands of nuclear weapons. The explosions created expanding spheres of superheated plasma that raced outward at incredible speeds. The lead Kethrin creature disappeared into the heart of the first explosion. Its massive body, which had survived the vacuum of space for decades, simply ceased to exist. The plasma charges had generated temperatures hotter than the surface of stars. Direct hit on target Alpha, Pierce reported. Target is completely destroyed. But the first explosion was just the beginning. As more Kethrin creatures moved into the killing zone, more asteroids detonated. The carefully timed sequence created a rolling wall of destruction that swept through the approaching horde. The creatures behind the leaders finally began to react. For the first time in their existence, they encountered something that could hurt them. Their calls changed from navigation songs to sounds of pain and confusion. They're trying to turn away, Dr. Cross observed, but they're moving too slowly. The explosions are faster than they can react. The second wave of detonations caught dozens of Kethrin creatures as they attempted to change course. The plasma charges had been positioned to account for their escape attempts. There was nowhere for them to go except into more explosions. From the safety of his command ship, Commander Alex Turner watched the destruction with mixed feelings. The sight was both magnificent and terrible. Entire groups of ancient creatures were being wiped out in seconds by human weapons. Phase 2, execute, Admiral Sullivan commanded. The next sequence of explosions was even larger. Human engineers had positioned massive asteroids along the Kethrin's retreat paths. As the creatures tried to flee, they ran directly into the second killing zone. The explosions were visible from the surface of Proxima Valaris. The Valari watched in stunned silence as their night sky filled with brief new stars. Many had never seen anything brighter than their peaceful crystal lamps. Prime Minister Sathina stood in her observation chamber, her skin flickering with patterns of shock and amazement. She was witnessing something that violated every principle her species held sacred, yet she could not deny that it was saving her people. The main body of the Horde is breaking apart, reported Captain Brooks. They're scattering in all directions, but most are heading back toward empty space. Continue the bombardment, Sullivan ordered. We need to eliminate as many as possible while they're confused. The third wave of explosions caught the fleeing creatures as they tried to escape. More asteroids detonated in perfect timing, each explosion calculated to cause maximum damage to the biological targets. Dr. Cross monitored the Kethrin vital signs through his sensors. Their stress levels are off the charts. They've never experienced fear before. They don't know how to process what's happening to them. The battle, if it could be called that, lasted only 20 minutes. When the final explosions faded, the space around Proxima Valaris was filled with debris and cooling plasma clouds. Of the 40,000 Kethrin creatures that had approached the system, fewer than 5,000 remained alive. The survivors fled back toward empty space, their migration broken. All stations report status, Admiral Sullivan commanded. One by one, the human ships reported in. Despite the massive explosions, no human vessels had been damaged. The operation had been executed with perfect precision. Admiral, Dr. Cross said quietly, long-range sensors are detecting the scattered survivors. They're heading in different directions but away from inhabited space. I don't think they'll try to group together again for a long time. Sullivan nodded with satisfaction. The immediate threat was over, but she knew this was just the beginning. Begin scanning for other Kethrin swarms in nearby systems. If there are more out there, we need to know about them. On the surface of Proxima Valaris, the celebration was muted and confused. The Valari understood that they had been saved, but they struggled to process how it had happened. The humans had accomplished something that seemed impossible to their peaceful minds. Ambassador Zathara sent a formal message to Admiral Sullivan. The Valari Federation extends its deepest gratitude to the people of Earth. You have saved our civilization, though we confess we do not fully understand your methods. But the message continued with a note of concern. We must also express our amazement at your capacity for destruction. The power you demonstrated today exceeds anything in our historical records. We hope that such capabilities will only be used to protect life, never to threaten it. Admiral Sullivan read the message privately in her quarters. She understood the Valari's mixed feelings. Humanity had just demonstrated that they could destroy forces that other civilizations considered unstoppable. That kind of power would make them both valued allies and feared neighbors. Commander Turner joined her as she finished reading. The other galactic civilizations are already requesting information about what happened here, he reported. Word is spreading quickly. Let them know we're available for consultation, Sullivan replied. If there are more Kethrin swarms out there, other species are going to need our help. And if they decide we're too dangerous to trust? Turner asked. Sullivan looked out at the stars, where human ships were already beginning to patrol for other threats. Then we'll deal with that problem when it comes. For now, we've saved 12 billion lives and proven that no threat is too big to overcome. The galaxy had learned something important that day. When peaceful civilizations faced extinction, sometimes salvation came from the most unexpected source. Sometimes it took creatures from a death world to remind the universe that no force of nature was truly unstoppable. In the end, the Valari had asked for aid, and the Deathworlders of Earth had delivered it in the most decisive way possible.